Unit 5, Understanding Learning Styles. At the conclusion of this unit, you will be able to identify the structures of the human brain and state their functions. List 3 basic modern learning theories. List the 3 basic learning styles. Recognize that students use different styles or a combination of styles to learn. Understand the principles of a good educational program. Learning is the process by which we receive, process, encode, store, and retrieve information. The amount of information that a human learns in a lifetime is enormous. All learning takes place in the brain, and as our understanding of the characteristics and structure of the human brain increases, we can utilize this information to provide better instructional opportunities. Our understanding of the human brain, its functions and makeup, has been enhanced through recent technological developments and years of behavioral studies. Scientists have been able to observe the brain at work through the use of imaging technologies such as magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. This equipment has allowed us to watch the brain's activity as it processes information into memory. Some basics about the brain include: on average, it weighs about 3 pounds. It has more than 100 million neurons, or nerve cells. Each of these neurons has between 5,000 and 50,000 connections to other neurons. The connections allow for the storage of massive amounts of information. The brain continues to develop until late adolescence, and the neurons continue to grow connections throughout the lifetime of the individual. The brain has 4 basic structures that control body functions, learning, and memory. The cerebral cortex is the area where sensory information is received and analyzed. Decisions are made, and responses are activated. The limbic system processes short-term memory into long-term memory. The cerebellum is involved in automatic movement patterns, jumping, walking, and other physical skills. And the brainstem, basic survival functions and regulates body systems. Now that we've covered the basic characteristics of the brain and how it functions, let's take a look at different theories about how humans learn. But before we do that, I want you to take a moment and think, what is a good definition of a theory? Basically, a theory provides general explanation of observations and is continuously modified. It can never be proven 100% correct, beyond any doubt. Generally, there are 3 basic theories about how information and skills are learned. In behaviorism, the theory is based on observable changes in behavior. Behaviors are repeated until the response is automatic, and students learn to respond a certain way to stimuli. Learning takes place after positive or negative reinforcement, basically cause and effect. This theory ignores the possibility of any thought process in learning. Cognitivism. Learning by repetition of information. Much of the learning involves associations established between continuous streams of information. Basically, the mind is like a computer. Short-term memory of information, but only some of this may be transferred into long-term memory. And finally, constructivism. Basically, learning by self-discovery and problem solving. Unlike behaviorism and cognitivism, this theory states that learning outcomes are not to be predetermined and will vary from one learner to the next. It results in more than one right answer. As with all theories, there are some strengths and weaknesses. With behaviorism theory, the strengths include the behavior is not learned if the correct stimulus is not given. The learner is focused on a clear goal and can respond automatically to similar situations. The teacher can observe the learning that has taken place, and the same response is given by many different students. Weaknesses include stimulus for the correct response does not occur and the behavior is not learned. Positive reinforcement must be what is expected. If negative reinforcement is too extreme, the students will just give up. Examples include students learn to raise their hands to answer a question. It is an automatic response done without thinking or being asked. Another example is fears based on past experiences, like the fear of being bitten by a dog because you had been bitten by the same type of dog in the past. Cognitivism theory. The strengths include the students perform a task consistently, and the objectives of that task are easily assessed and measured. Weaknesses include what is learned may not be the correct way, but still achieves the learning objective. Cognitivism theory does not foster creative thinking or problem-solving skills. An example of this would be repeating your spelling words over and over again, trying to remember them for a test. Or a soldier repeatedly disassembling and assembling his or her weapon according to the drill sergeant's instructions. Constructivism. The strengths include the students are better able to adapt to real-life situations. Basically, they think on their feet. And the students can develop their own better way to solving problems. The weaknesses include the students perform a set of tasks differently than what the instructor wishes, and the learning and outcomes are not easily measured. Examples of this include tying your shoes differently than someone else because your way is easier, or when faced with a dilemma, coming up with multiple solutions for solving it. How do you learn best? Do you learn better by listening or by reading? Are you a hands-on type of learner, or do you need someone to guide you? Let's take a look at the 3 basic learning styles that an individual uses to gain knowledge and skills. Depending on the person, learning may occur most effectively using one style by itself or by utilizing a combination of these styles. The three basic learning styles are auditory learning, visual learning, and kinesthetic tactile learning. Auditory learners are those students that learn best by hearing information. They remember details from lectures and conversations and have strong language and oral communication skills. Visual learners learn best by seeing. They remember details from pictures, charts, graphs, or diagrams. They often see movies in their mind when reading a book. They pay close attention to body language of others. Kinesthetic or tactile learners learn best by moving and touching. They work well with their hands. They often move their legs, tap their feet, or wiggle when sitting. Unfortunately, sometimes these students are labeled as hyperactive. They may be very coordinated and athletic. Sometimes students learn by combining all three basic styles: the visual learning, auditory learning, and kinesthetic tactile learning. This is called the multimodality concept. The most effective teaching techniques focus on all learning styles throughout instruction. Some important points to remember. All students do not learn the same way. To be effective, you need to appeal to all learning styles throughout your lessons. Teaching techniques that combine auditory, visual, and kinesthetic learning work best. Explain, demonstrate, and involve your students. Let's take a little bit of time and figure out what is your preferred learning style. The questionnaire that follows will help you determine which learning style you prefer most. The O'Brien Modality Questionnaire. Read each sentence carefully and consider if it applies to you when completing this questionnaire. On a separate piece of paper, indicate if the sentence never applies to you, mark with a 1, sometimes applies to you, mark with a 2, often applies to you, mark with a 3. We will start first with the visual preferred channel. Read each sentence and then on the separate piece of paper, mark your answer. The next preferred channel is the auditory channel. And finally, the kinesthetic tactile preferred channel. Now, add up the scores of each of the three sections: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic or haptic total. The maximum score in any section is 30 and the minimum score is 10. The highest score indicates the preferred learning channel. A relatively high score in 2 or more sections means that you are a multi-modality learner. If all are roughly equal, there is no preference in your learning style.